as you might see it, is this house welcomes the decline of the United States of America as a superpower. What is a superpower? What is a decline? You're going to find out. Don't worry about that. But let us go to some formalities so we don't look like weirdos who just constantly jump up and down and what do we do. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply the form called British parliamentary debate, which mimics the way the British Parliament functions with the upper houses and the lower houses. So as you might have guessed, the government proposes the motion and the opposition opposes the motion. It's not that hard, right? But what is happening is on each side you have two teams, so 4 altogether. And on each side, you need to expect each team to win the debate. So there is no, for example, proposition win. It's either second government or first government which wins the debate, right? But leaving that aside, just introduce yourselves very shortly. We have a variety of debaters here from different faculties, so we're going to, you stand up and introduce you. So for first government, debating are Jure from the Faculty of Mathematics, right? Here is Jure. And Ayosha from the Faculty of, actually he's studying nuclear physics. He's one of the people who actually On first opposition, we have Jerne, who is studying electrical engineering, and Mikael, who is studying philosophy and sociology. Here we go. Then we have second government, we have Jaka, student of law, and we have Manja, student of economics. And at last we have second opposition, so the lower houses, which we have Daniel, who studies political sciences, and Spela, who is doing a PhD in defense arts. Now, the reason why we chose the debate motion is because obviously we read about the USA all the time in the news. Be that an invasion of a country, be that spreading democracy, whichever way we turn around, they're predominant in our world as a hegemonic power, as a superpower. Now, in order to judge this debate, the proposition is going to give you some criteria, and without any further ado, if you have any questions, oh yeah, I forgot to say something. We stand up sometimes and ask questions to the speaker. So, for example, if I'm speaking here, and if Spela stands up, here we go. She might ask a question. I might be impolite and do this, which means, no, Spela, thank you very much, but I don't have the time to say that, because I'm talking in my motion. Like, I'm making arguments, right? Don't be alarmed if anybody stands up and screams, sir, or madam. It's, again, back to the British Parliament. It's how they used to do it, and this is the format. The speaker might reject or accept the question, and then they have to answer. And that's pretty much all. Any questions? No? Okay. Let the debate begin.
So, hello ladies and gentlemen. This House welcomes the decline of a country that demands human rights, yet tortures prisoners. This House welcomes the decline of a country that cries democracy, while 99% of its people are powerless. This House welcomes the decline of these United States. What we're going to show to you in this debate is why the decline of the USA is good from, firstly, an ideological standpoint, and secondly, from a more economical standpoint. Now, we don't believe that we need to argue whether or not the USA is in decline. The mere fact that we're debating this motion points to this. But we're going to tell you what a superpower is. And under our definition, a superpower is basically someone who has either great political might, great military, great economics, or a great ideological pull in the international community. And the USA certainly meets all of these criteria. Okay. Now, no thank you. On to my first point, which is where I'm going to explain why US world power is a detrimental system that cannot be fought from within. That it's a system of ideology, and that this ideology in itself is the bad thing. It's the American thing about this superpower that we need to fight against. And I would start by explaining what this system is. It's a system that dominates based on the glorification of the ideals of freedom and democracy. It's a system that constantly puts these banners up in the sky saying we're doing this for freedom, we're doing this to bring the people justice, for human rights. And I am going to show to you how America is neither free nor democratic, and how their way of doing this is systemic corruption. But what the problem with this system is that we're tackling here today is that this system cannot be fought from within, that it's constructed in a way that whenever anyone points a finger at America and says, you're doing this, and this, and this, and you shouldn't be doing this, they're automatically labeled undemocratic. They're automatically labeled as someone who doesn't like freedom, doesn't like democracy, even though, no thank you, even though this, in many cases, is absolutely not the case. Okay, what is bad about the USA as such? Basically, the problem is that they aren't democratic, that they aren't free, and that they're using this as a widespread excuse to do whatever it is they're doing in the world. These exceptions you might hear that come up, such as sometimes they break this law, sometimes they violate human rights, are actually a part of the system itself. The system thrives on these things. For example, the notorious example of Guantanamo Bay, right? We all know that it's bad. We all know that they shouldn't keep these prisoners in this inhumane conditions. This has been discussed over and over again. And yet they still continue doing this. America, no thank you, is the only country in the world that gets the benefit of the doubt. If Germany decides to invade Austria, no one doubts whether or not this is for freedom, for equality, but if the USA were to do it, well, maybe the government was corrupt. Maybe they needed the democracy. Don't you agree?
What happens when USA starts to decline and we get China as the alternative?
Thank you. Now, why USA is so different from China will be explained further in my second speaker's point, but let me just indicate. The fact of the matter is, China is perceived by everyone else as the enemy. We are more likely to be able to fight against someone we understand and know to be the enemy and know to have hostile intentions than someone who sneaks up from behind with claims of freedom, of democracy, of peace, who claims to have our ideals and yet exploits the situation for their own benefit. No, thank you. Okay, moving on. Why the US and how they expand in the world is detrimental. Their expansion into the world is like a virus, okay? A virus takes over a cell, turns it into a viral cell, which uses that viral cell to produce more viruses. And this is exactly what the USA keeps doing. It invades a country, gives it democracy, and that uses that country to further on establish its position in the world as the world police, as someone who spreads freedom, who spreads democracy to all these countries who need this. And many times, they start the fires they put out themselves. No thank you. During the Bush administration, they were allies with Libya, they were allies with Syria, they were allies with Egypt. Where are we now? They vastly criticize all of these regimes and plan on taking interventive steps to topple them. Bin Laden was trained by US soldiers. Bin Laden was a trade partner with the Bush family. And this happens all the time, and this happens intentionally by the United States of America. And then things like 9/11 happen, and what this basically does is legitimizes all of their crusades in the Middle East for decades to come. Because whenever they need to intervene, they say, well, we're fighting terrorists. And again, this will be explained further on by my second speaker. What we see here in this decline of the American system on its own is a chance for a vacuum of power, is a chance for a vacuum of ideology, and is a chance for a new world order we haven't had the chance to experience yet, because the US is so deeply rooted within the world. So for all these reasons, we welcome the decline of the USA as a superpower.
Ladies and gentlemen, what side proposition on their side of the House believes is that they want to have a nation in decline that screams human rights yet torture prisons. But what we are afraid on our side of the House is that we will get an alternative country which doesn't scream human rights yet it still tortures prisoners. What we believe is that it is a good idea to have values implemented within your system and then you break them sometimes, rather than have a country which doesn't have that implemented and then does the bad things that we do not like. What we want this debate to be judged on is how the people of the free world are going to be affected and how the people who want to live in a free world are going to be implemented once we recognize the US's decline and what happens later on. So let's answer a couple of questions. Whether or not a multipolar world is possible or not, or rather, let's just establish why China is the most necessary actor that is going to follow suit once US declines. Secondly, I will tell you why USA basically rocks in its ideology. Fourthly, I'll be talking about military aspects for the people of the free world and those who want to live in the free world, and economic aspects as well. Before that, they bring you arguments where they talk about, no thank you, I'll just let you stand up. They talk to us about ideology and why US's ideology is bad. And they here talk to you about why there is systemic abuse happening around the world. To that we say no, it's quite the opposite. What they're doing is they have implemented civil liberties, the rule of law, and respect for the individual. They have implemented cultural emancipation of the individual that no other superpower currently in the prospect has. Bad things happen, and they would happen anyway. It would be worse in other systems. Stop shaming. Right. So, why is China necessarily going to fall? First of all, because it's showing signs of expansionism. First of all, their military is growing and their economy is bound to take over the US at around 2017. Secondly, they own most of the world's debt. Thirdly, we have seen that, as I already explained, their expansionist mentality is actually giving us a sign that they want to become a superpower. Why does a potential superpower candidate want to become such? Because they can then more easily further their own interests. Go.
What is the world's foremost international institution which has oversight over the actions of the state?
I guess UN. I don't know. I didn't really get what we're trying to say. Right. Moving into the military and why it's going to be bad for the people of the free world. Firstly, we need to take into account that there's going to be, with US's decline, there's going to be less prevention of conflict and less resolution of conflicts around the world. Because it's the US that goes into Somalia and kills the bad guys of Al-Shabaab that want to take over the country. It's US that funds oppositional fighters in Libya. It is US that is now arming the Syrian rebels. It is US that is doing all these things, whereas other countries, other potential superpower candidates don't have that in their interest. Secondly, with US's decline, we have less capability of preventing China's bullying of countries that surround it, such as Japan, such as Taiwan, which we now have done by the show of force with US's presence there. So with US's decline, that is going to be less possible. And the free people of Taiwan and Japan are going to be worse off. Moving into the economical argument, we say that it's in the interest of every superpower that exists to expand economically, because in that way they reassert their position. What we have to take into account that if USA expands economically, it's bound by the rule of law that is enshrined and in their own existence. When US goes and US companies go into Ecuador and exploit their national resources and mess up their land, Ecuadorian people go into US, file a suit and get compensation. It takes a while, but it gets done. When China goes to Sudan and exploits their natural resources and messes up their land, Sudanese people don't have the opportunity to go back and file a suit in China. We believe that US has a very good system of values implemented and enshrined in the world system. The alternative of China, which is most likely to take over, doesn't have that. People of the free world and people who want to live in a free world are going to be living in a dire state of affairs. I beg you.
We just heard 5 minutes of US propaganda here in this classroom. Why? Because we live in a society that is influenced by US, and it is in our life, it is forcing us to live by their standards. This is the problem that we have today. This is what we want to get rid of. And this is what we're doing today with declining American superpower. We want you to stop thinking like Americans. We want you to stop thinking and exploiting other people like Americans. We want you to avoid the law because we want you to be different than America that does not obey the law. And this is what we are talking about today. Ladies and gentlemen, the side opposition today is trying to show that this debate is about China versus America. No, this debate is about America versus the rest of the world, and this is what we're talking about. After the decline of America, we believe what will happen is that we will have a wide vacuum of power in which the ideas in which new world can be formed. Right? This is what we're talking about. I will first show you why China as such is not a very good candidate for the next superpower. Why? Because it won't be the next superpower. Secondly, we will talk about this military stuff, and we will see how America actually forced this military stuff to happen in order to actually go on and further deepens their involvement in the world. Right? Then we will talk about the economy, and we will see how the mentality that was taken in Ecuador is actually just the wrong one. Okay? Now let's go to China. Why China won't be superpower? 4 reasons. Firstly, China does not have tensions to further expand their territory. Why is it in China? We never saw China actually going to any war. We never saw China claiming some other territory. We never saw China showing its potential whatsoever. Yes, they're powerful, but they are not trying to do that. Second of all, we are ready for it. We can be thankful for something to America. We are scared of China. And because we are scared of China, we are much less likely to allow them to become superpower as we did to America, under which influence we were. Thirdly, we say what will happen is their economy. Their economy is unsustainable on the long term. Why? Because they're producing a lot of CO2 emissions that are actually polluting their society. Every year in China, 750,000 premature deaths happen because of this. This is what we're talking about. This is what. Further on, further on, China on that point actually stopped. China actually stopped growing their population. The peak of their population was in 2011. Now it's falling. Their economics is trying to fall. Fourth of all, what's happening in China is they're beginning to have the inside problems. So they will be much more occupied with the inside problems that are rising in China than to actually go to explore their other things. So ladies and gentlemen, ongoing environmental concerns, the aging population, the competition with India, with Vietnam, with Brazil, with European Union, internal dissent and unhappiness. This will combine with the culture that does not encourage taking risks. The culture that does not encourage creativity. This will stop the growth of China, and will leave the elite frustrated and wondering. Ladies and gentlemen, China is and will be a great power, but not now, not ever. It will be a superpower. This you need to acknowledge today. Then they come to this idea about the military, and here we say. And here they say less conflicts will be solved. What we say with the decline of America, there will be less conflicts whatsoever. Why? Because today America is going into the countries, forcing the opposition to actually start going against the regime and starting the conflicts with such in order to go. What they do next? They go and actually put out the fire with interest of economics. This is what happened in the case of Afghanistan. What happened is they went there with purely economical interest. They went to Iraq with purely economical interest, based on the wrong and lie. They lie to UN, to all of us. This is the America that we're talking about and problematic, right? They say they bring civil liberties. Afghanistan 30 years ago was one of the most progressive Muslim countries. Women were walking around in the high heels. Today, there is a Sharia law. It's one of the most conservative. This is the liberties that we're talking about. They are not exploring whatsoever. They come to the economic point and they say rule of law, and they give us the example of Ecuador. What happened there? This is the wrong mentality we're talking about. What they're actually legitimizing is they are saying you can go there, you can destroy something, and they give them money. Later, this is a wrong, very wrong technology that we need to fight against. Why? Because it leaves you to actually believe that everything is about money, but it's not, and it shouldn't be. Ladies and gentlemen, I here stand, and I'm not welcoming. I'm applauding the decline of the country that goes and tortures people, that goes and not giving the poor people in their country option to be educated and to have a healthcare system. I applaud the decline of the country where 1% control each other. For all these reasons, ladies and gentlemen, yeah.
Alyosha applauds the decline of America because America is not perfect. That's his basic argument. But what we told you is, in order to judge this debate, we have to think about which system will be better for the majority of the world. We're not saying that America is perfect. We're saying, are we facing a worse future because China is rising? But in order to make this point, I need to again establish why China is the most likely candidate to be rising. So let's go into that. And they say China doesn't have any intention or doesn't have any wish to expand because we see it never went into wars. Well, we tell you that it didn't go into wars because it couldn't colonize Japan and its southern sea islands because America was there. We tell you that it didn't attack Taiwan. Why? Because America had a show of arms there. So we see that this is the reason why China didn't go into wars. But even if that is true, we tell you it does have an expansionistic mentality. Which is the country which is having the majority of oil drilling down in Africa right now? China is expanding economically the fastest possible. Here we go. Yeah. Then they'd say, oh, but it's unsustainable economics. Because what is happening is their people are being poisoned by CO2 emissions. Yeah, and they're developing economically. We're not saying their people are going to survive. We're saying they're developing. Additionally, if we want to go into facts, China right now is the country which invests the most amount of money in green technology than any other else in the world. So we see that that argument is not going to fly. Maybe they're trying to restructure their economy to be suitable for the long-term economic expansion. And then they say, oh, but we have this alternative because EU is going to rise and it's going to be the next superpower. Well, guess what? EU doesn't have a standing army. It cannot be a superpower if part of being a superpower is being military present in the world. And they say, oh, but Brazil is going to intervene. Yeah, the same way Brazil had a say in anything which is happening in the Middle East, and it tried to intervene with its military, which is huge, in every other conflict and placing its military around the world. So we see that those examples are just not suitable for this debate. But what happens is, they say any military intervention is worse for the people who are living in the country there, such as Afghanistan and Iraq. But what we tell you here is, how are the Kurds facing right now in Iraq? Honey, before America intervened, they were living under what? A dictatorship which was killing them on the street. They were given no rights based on their ethnicity or on their religion. Right now, they get a share of the national revenue which they get from oil exporting, which we think is good. They're growing as an economy. They have more social rights implemented, and we think that's a good thing. Not everything is perfect, but it's happening. Let's go next, Afghanistan. They say, oh, but people cannot have free education because of America. Last time we checked, Taliban were the ones who were killing people who were trying to get an education, while America is the one who tried to prevent Taliban from spreading their influence in Afghanistan, and additionally is the one which is establishing via funding new schools in Afghanistan. So they're the ones who are providing for civil liberties. So we face that. Let's go to my argument, which is, why is America, when it comes to the ideology of freedom and civil rights, and those which are trying to spread, better, and I'm going to take it in a second, than, for example, China? Why is this better when it comes to negotiating with a superpower? Yes?
So their job in Afghanistan and Iraq is completely can go.
No, we're not saying it's perfect, but we're saying compare it to what China does. How does China deal with Sudanese people who live there? It exports them out, it takes them away from their homes, it burns their homes down, it starts drilling without giving any compensation to what? Any of the people who live in Sudan. Let's go back to China. What is happening to its domestic population, which China is so good?
Sir.
Well, pretty much human rights violation. They have a longer list of human rights violations than they do of their own alphabet, which is one of the biggest alphabets in the world. So we think that point basically falls because they're not an actor which is trying to implement human rights. So even though America might not be perfect, they're the ones who are creating a better world. So let's go to our argument, which is, why is America a better superpower for the people who are not a superpower in comparison to China? Because they are controlled. There are checks and balances which are put upon America, and they're not put on others. Concretely, we talk about the checks and balances of the civil population which lives within the America. For example, we have seen, why has America retreated from Vietnam is because people were uproaring that this was an unjust war which was fought unjustly and that America should retreat, which means there's a check and balance there. How does China deal with civil unrest and protest? Well, pretty much it kills it. And I'm not even talking metaphorically. It suppresses it in every possible way. So how does, for example, America deal with people uproaring and saying, sorry, Guantanamo Bay was not legitimate? They're forced to shut it down and apologize for what is happening. It's not a perfect system, mistakes happen, but there's a check and balance and there's a control mechanism which is put upon America, and it's not put on other superpowers. And for that reason, we think that because of the check and balance, it is easier for us of the unfree world, or the people who want to live in a free world, to deal with America, simply because of that. Because of that mechanism which China does not possess. We should clap. Okay. So, because we want to live in a free world, and we don't want a world of China expansionism, of China not caring about its own people or our people when it expands and becomes a superpower, we see that America is the better, albeit not the best option. So we regret the decline of America. Thank you.
Now, apparently it was Chinese soldiers who were on an Apache helicopter shooting Iraqis and screaming, "Get 'em, get 'em." It was the Chinese soldiers who were killing journalists, American journalists, from an Apache helicopter. We say that human rights violations through expansionism committed by the US were far worse than the ones committed by Chinese. Now, we agree with what Theo said. This is essentially a debate of which system or which solution is worse. Do we have America as a superpower, or do we have China as a superpower? But then we get a few ridiculous things from their side, and I will tackle them in 2 points. First, I'll talk about foreign policy and what they describe as bullying of neighbor states. Then we'll talk about judicial oversight in international relations. And lastly, I'll talk about how the decline in the power of the United States subsequently decreases the potential for unilateral action on their part, and why that is good. Now, what we get from opening up is that China is showing signs of expansionism, right? They're buying oil. They're building hospitals in Angola. They're investing in infrastructure in Sudan. We say that this is the expansionism today's side opposition fears. China is expanding because it's buying the US debt. If it wasn't for China buying the US debt, 3/4 of US economy would have been destroyed by the financial crisis. We say that it is China buying the US debt which is saving the US from collapsing financially. Then they talk about how China is so bad in bullying Taiwan and neighboring states. We say these are regional disputes, right? We say that US, yes, we agree they don't have a problem with neighboring states. But what about El Salvador, Nicaragua, Chile, Vietnam, Honduras, Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, and practically every other state in the world, no thank you, which has a stan in it, right? We think that America does not limit itself in bullying neighbor states, but it does not limit itself in any way whatsoever. What they have been doing in the 1970s and 1980s is they have been funding opposition groups in Latin America, in El Salvador, Nicaragua, Chile, Honduras, etc., in trying to overthrow democratic regimes which were emerging. Why? Because the US had good relations with the autocrats which were in place at that time. We say that this is the autocracy we're seeing from the United States. And when Nicaragua sued, no thank you, and this gets me to the judicial oversight, and when Nicaragua sued the US for what they were doing, when Nicaragua sued the US for funding Contras, for sending ex-Nazi generals trained by the CIA into Latin America for overthrowing democratic regimes, when Nicaragua sued them before the ICJ, at that point, USA said, no, we do not recognize jurisdiction of the ICJ. When ICJ said, no, you cannot do it, America simply refused to show up. When the ICJ ruled in favor of Nicaragua, they blocked They blocked the ruling in the Security Council, so Nicaragua got no financial reparations whatsoever. This is the all-powerful United States. It sends Nazi generals into foreign countries and then neglects to pay the compensation. Go.
Yes, but at least we've heard that in the newspaper. Had China done that, we wouldn't even have known.
Well, the fact is that China recognizes jurisdiction of the ICJ, and were China to do something like that, it would be the ICJ who would act as a check on that actions, right? America, under status quo, has no limits on what they're doing in the international sphere whatsoever. ICJ has no power, ICC has no power. China, when we're talking about China, ICJ has the power to limit the actions of the Chinese government. Now, briefly on the point on how decrease in monopoly decreases potential for unilateral action. We believe that being a superpower means to have the ability to act independently of other countries, right? That you have resources to act independently of other countries, and that you're independent, that your behavior is independent of interest of other countries. As soon as you lose your position as a superpower, you become dependent of other countries. The US is becoming dependent of other countries in buying their debt. It is becoming dependent of China, yes. If it wasn't for China, they'd went bankrupt. It is also dependent of all the other countries, not only China, who are buying their debt. And we say that the mere fact that they are becoming dependent of someone shows that there is more check and less potential for unilateral action from the side of the US for such unilateral action we've been seeing in the 1970s and 1980s, and we beg you to support the motion. Thank you.
Now you see this debate, there was one big problem. There were a lot of naive arguments here. A lot of this is the end result arguments here. What we are going to explain, what we are going to show, there are alternatives to China before China, called anarchy, pre-World War I Europe. Now, why is this so? Look at it this way. China now is not that big. China is not militaristically so powerful. It's going to take them, as they said, about 50 years or more. We are here, and this is 50 years later. And if we welcome the decline, if the decline starts, this is going to be a power struggle. This is what we are going to say. We hate we do not welcome the decline. Because the decline of this, the dying of the American power in the region, the fighting for the resources, because the Americans is going to destroy the fabrics of human rights we have established by now. And this, I'm going to talk about the time of empires. So in the time of empires, with the benefits for the most number of people were there. Secondly, about where interventions are necessary. One person here is going to say to me the interventions are not necessary in Syria, in Somalia, in Mali, in other states. And please, I have to hear this, and this I have to hear.
I am going to say that because what they are doing is forcing this modernization, this westernization on these countries.
Yeah, I'm horrible. I'm really horrible, when women are stoned or women are burned. This is, I know, westernization of that, preventing them from stoning women. Oh, I'm sorry. That's so horrible of us, so damn cheeky of us. This is, I know this is problematic, but, sometimes we like human rights, etc. So this is what I'm going to explain in this my speech. That we are all very naive here. Let's be realistic for a moment here. Are people bad, good or bad? No. Is this very unipolar? No. But let's go to the time of empires. The greatest stability for people, the progress for peoples in the time of empires, the Roman Empire. It took us 2,000 years to get the same medical care the Romans had. Because when the Roman Empire fell, when the Visigoths destroyed Rome, when the wars were being fought, when they were chopping off the Rome, they were destroying everyone else. They were destroying Rome. They were killing people. There was mass chaos. It was death. When the church then came and tried to fill the void, more death, and death. And this is what we're talking about. The alternative to this, before that, is a lot of death. And we do not welcome that. This is what this debate is about. We do not welcome that. Now, let's say when the British Empire fell, the First World War started, 37 million dead. Then we had the between war period, another 20 million dead. Then the Soviet Empire was starting to rise. 20 million dead because of Stalin. Second World War, 60 million dead. And this is the other argument here. There was all the examples they had in their speeches were not Vietnam, were Nicaragua. All of these examples happened when they were opposing the Soviet Union. Another superpower, which was apparently a balance of power there, but it wasn't. This is another argument here, but I'm going to talk about how the empires, when they're fighting, they do not use negotiating skills, they do not use debate, they don't use the UN. It's a force of military force. They use the military to prove their own right. This is what the Soviets did in Afghanistan. This is what the Americans did in Iraq. They were fighting for the land. They were fighting, but there was more fighting. We know what's the difference? Now, the US is the only power capable of doing interventions. This is my second argument. This is what we are saying is the best, the system that benefits the most people. This is this one. Who is the only one capable of doing an intervention? No, the US. And everyone is going to the US, and interventions are necessary. And this is one of the biggest problems they had in all of their speeches. China is going to, didn't even invade, didn't do anything. China is one of the biggest human rights violators there is. No, it's one of the biggest human rights violators there is. And again, interventions are necessary. They were necessary in Syria, Libya. They're necessary. You can see in Syria what's happening. When you have the precious balance of power in a region, they can't invade Syria, because if they invade Syria, they're going to go in a global war. This is the problem when you have a balance of power. Nobody goes in because the bloody nose will come out. And now we have, there were 100,000 dead in Syria, because the balance of power is preventing the US from establishing order in that. And this is the crude reality of this world. Don't be naive in the philosophical faculty, the faculty of social science. We all get along. This is not the reality, ladies and gentlemen. The reality is that the reality is that we are all being targeted by different bad people. And talking about it may help. Having actually have a power there who can stop them is better.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the opposition side today welcomes peace. They welcome freedom. They welcome intervention, as they were telling us in the second table. But what we're saying is that even though those things are very much welcome in today's world, they just aren't provided from the United States. And because of the fact that they aren't provided, nor they ever will be provided, and even contrary, they are being in the decline, we see that that the United States, that we welcome the decline of the United States. So, firstly, what we are going to talk about is about the ideology. So, what were they telling us was basically that, well, the United States, they have great ideology. Principles. They are great in supporting that. But what we see is that no, the United States they do not have one point on which they stand as a superpower in providing civil rights. First of all, we were telling about the attaché and about shooting the people. Then, on second point, we are saying that civil rights, that the person that has civil rights shouldn't be pissed upon from the side of the American soldier. Yes, don't you agree?
But we told you that examples of human rights violations are reported back, and America gets booed for it, so it needs to change its practice.
Thank you. But nevertheless, we see that in the majority cases, nothing really happened. And that's also the point that we learned throughout the history, that because America is the superpower, they have the power to violate the civil rights that they are so much fighting for them. And furthermore, what we're saying about the freedom that we have seen from several cases from the inside of the America, that even in the inside they are not supporting the freedom itself. To go a bit radical, what we see is, for example, that so-called free America, free United States For example, in Texas, men aren't allowed to have fake mustache in the church. So what we see on that point is that even the most basic, ridiculous freedom that they should have is being violated. And furthermore, what we're saying is that even if China comes to be the next power, or even if it doesn't really matter, because in either way, we will be better off than having America as this main superpower. Because first of all, what we see is that China, for example, they are under the jurisdiction of the ICG, and they just won't walk away as America did in the past. But furthermore, what we see is that basically what China does, even though they do drill oil from foreign states, for example from Africa, what we see is that their way isn't the violent way. Because the United States of America, they simply come into the state and claim that they will have that oil because it's theirs for I don't know which reason. But what China does is they do something great for those states. They help them. China helps them. China buys their oil. China doesn't make this kind of mistakes that we should simply forgive the United States. But when I'm at the mistakes, let's just continue at that point. What the government side today is saying, well, yeah, we have this superpower, and from time to time it does a simple mistake. But we are saying, okay, even if it does mistake, they should stand responsible for that mistake. They should go to the court. They should feel responsible. They should show for the rest of the world how responsible superpower they really are. But in the end of the day, that never really happened. And furthermore, go.
Nuremberg trials, the pillar of all international law she talks about, were set up by the US. The US single-handedly created international law.
First of all, we do not have time to discuss this kind of point. So on first point, I say that we simply disagree that the United States of America made this kind of international law. But on the second point, just doing one good deed doesn't mean that we should forgive all of the rest of the deeds that they commit. But furthermore, what we're saying is about the intervention point of view. Even if America comes into decline, we are saying that interventions won't just simply stop. We have other means that we can help these people. We can help and walk into their country and try to help them with the other ways. So the America isn't the single point in that way. So because of the reason that America is not supporting their ideology, because America is not supporting freedom, and because China, even if it comes to the power, won't be such a bad state, we simply ask you to oppose this motion.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm a true realist. I study defense studies. I do not believe in a utopia where we magically all get along, but I do believe in a system that makes for the best living for the most people. That is the system that benefits most people. Yes, some people will always get tortured. Yes, some people will always have less money than other people. That is the reality. That is the reality that will not change in the next 50 to 100 years that it takes the US to decline. So what we are proposing on this side is that their welcoming of this decline brings us to anarchy. It brings us to a state of balance of power. As Daniel pointed out, the last time we had a true balance of power was pre-World War I Europe, ladies and gentlemen. 100 million people died in less than 7 years following that. That is not a system that I support. Now, I will not debate whether US ideology per se is always good. But I will say that it's good more time than it is bad. That is all it takes the side of the opposition to win this argument. We do not have to prove that US is good. I agree with some of their arguments, not all of them, and I will rebut them. But allow me to start with what will probably seem like a stupid argument. The speaker before me brought the case of not being allowed to wear a mustache in a church in Texas. That, ladies and gentlemen, if she done another step of analysis, as good debaters should, is the fact that that is the freedom of religion. And that freedom of religion for that church to prevent that is only possible in the US and in the Western liberal world, ladies and gentlemen. So with that, let me show you how other things are better. No, thank you. Democracy is bad. No, democracy is not bad. Even 2,000 years ago, some of you who studied exportation of democracy and democracy as the US has it is what your case is on. You said the ideology of the US is bad. The ideology of the US is democracy, religious freedom, family, and such rights. No, thank you. So when we call upon the idea of China as an alternative, the side of opposition showed you that China is bad. I will not make further arguments on that point. China went to wars, ladies and gentlemen. China annexed populations, annexed whole regions. You do not get a country the size of China without doing some bad. China has two words for internal strife and freedom of expression. Those two words are Tiananmen Square, ladies and gentlemen. This country will not provide for a better living for its own citizens, let alone the citizens of the world. And here I'll go back to the speaker before me, where she said, when China goes to a country, it buys its oil and does something good for this country, instead of the US that buys the oil and then, horrible things happen. No, ladies and gentlemen, when Halliburton went to Iraq to extract oil, it then created a power-sharing deal for that oil and for those resources between the Shia, the Sunni, and the Kurds, ladies and gentlemen. When China goes to Sudan to get its precious oil, it doesn't care what it happens to the Yuba or the mountains or the South. South Sudan was created because the US and the Western liberal democracy said enough of the oppression. Not because China bought their oil and said, oh, and I will also make the life of your people any better. No, ladies and gentlemen. No, thank you. International law, ladies and gentlemen. Now, after that horrible balance of powers that might happen when the US declines stopped in Europe, that's when the Nuremberg trials started. It's when the US general, ladies and gentlemen, people such as myself, people of the military, not people of philosophy or other people, but when those people said there needs to be justice. And those were the first international proceedings, ladies and gentlemen. That is the foundation of international law, whether the two lawyers on the side bench agree with that or not. And ladies and gentlemen, ICC, ICJ, the UN, all of it came when the US helped win World War II. The US is a superpower, and as a superpower, it entertains the follies of lawyers such as the two of them. It entertains the idea of debating, it gives a chance to debate, and it gives a chance of dialogue. China will not do this. We do not know enough about China as expansionist to not do that. And even if China is not... No, thank you. You didn't give me a chance. I won't give you a chance either. So when you go back, even if China doesn't become the alternative, we look at the other alternative. The other alternative is 100 years of mayhem. Anarchy. Anarchy is the reason why we have states, and it's the reason why we have international law. Because it's a horrible place to live in. Thank God they did it 4,000 years ago so that we don't have to experience it, ladies and gentlemen. The point of this debate is not whether US is bad, whether China is bad, or whatever. The point of it is, will this decline lead to something better? We say it leads to uncertainty, it leads to a potential new oppressor such as China, of whom we know nothing about, and it leads to the erosion of international law and all the liberties we have right now, ladies and gentlemen. I ask you to vote for the side that proposes that a system that we know, the devil we know, continues to exist, and we can live by the rules that we already know and win. I do not want to play a game where the rules keep changing. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, may I first ask you for a round of applause from all four tables. Now, tense moment. Yesterday, Maribor, they had elections there. Today, Ljubljana. Which team is going to win? So, may I see the hands of those who support the first government, please? So this will be easy to count. Thank you. And the first position. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. Thank you. The second government. Japan Kmania.
Why do people vote?
One. Good. Anybody for the second position? Thank you. So today's winners, Daniel and Shvira. And because Miriam, well, it's your time now to ask questions, but before we do that, Miriam bestowed her powers upon me. So today we have a special prize, or let's say another winner, for the team that fought, well, the best dressed team, in short. Okay? Because they fought, they had some sort of multimedia approach. Other teams tried their best, there's a good try, and you have a t-shirt. But the team, both of them had a t-shirt, a telling t-shirt. That's the first government, ladies and gentlemen. Born to rule, and sort of physics and religion, that's a winning combination. Thank you. So, do you have any questions? Sorry? Oh, yeah, would you stand up, please? Thank you.
I never expected my band tee to win a competition.
Yeah, that's... But it's multimedia approach. You see, born to rule, he says. Breathe more, my man. Breathe more. Yes, there's a question over there.
Since a large part of this debate was about freedom, civil liberties, and interventionism, I'm just wondering, what's your take on Rand Paul's filibuster?
He had a good run. Yeah. He had a good run. He didn't break the record though. So I don't know what you were saying. Oh yeah, about the killings of American citizens not on U.S. soil. I think he got an answer from Attorney General, which said that it's illegal for the president to issue orders to kill American citizens.
No, I'm asking also because he's one of the likely candidates for the next president, for the next campaign. And it might be a relevant question.
I don't think you get your question, really. So, Rand Paul and what? Sneakers. And sneakers. No, he ate sneakers. Yeah. He might run for president. So, sorry. No. Okay. Cool.
I think it's important because this is a new way of technology. This is a new way to fight, right? It's drones, it's targeted killings. It's either Americans or also you can debate the morality of killing people without you suffering any casualties. And I think that he did the important thing of starting the debate on this issue. You need to have rules of engagement and law of war for any new technology. We had it with horses, we updated it for tanks, and we updated it for landmines. So drones needed. I don't think people in America have the attention span to remember it in 2016, honestly, right? But I do think he positioned himself well. He did it within his party's sort of politics and what the party believes in. But I don't think it will be a cornerstone. Of course, he'll go back and say, oh, and do you remember I had a 13-hour filibuster? But this is a democracy with great benefits, one of them being a filibuster. And that is not going to be the last filibuster before the election. So I think more than in terms of winning an election, he did a good step of opening up a debate into having to have laws of engagement. And not only the US will have to look at laws of engagement for drones and unmanned aerial vehicles worldwide, right? So the UN and other agencies will have to come up with an acceptable use for such devices. And I think this is where he's going to be remembered in history rather than will this help him win a war. The war election, which is war, basically.
Not quite happy?
I'm happy.
You are. Any other questions? Shall we go with that? Or would you like to say?
Oh yeah, just last thing, yeah. So if anybody liked this, /enjoyed it, or sees potential in this, we're meeting every Monday and every Wednesday at the Faculty of Arts, always at 7:40 p.m. On Monday, it's O2 in the basement. On Wednesday, it's 306.
Faculty of Arts?
Oh, yeah. In the Fox. Anyways, debate clubs is going on. So check it out. If you want to join us, we're always, we welcome everybody with open hands. That's
Okay, this is a very, very fast and quick debate. Yes, sorry, yes.
Of course, if you like this, on the 5th and 6th of April, there will be the National Debate Tournament at the Faculty of Math and Physics, and you are all welcome to come and speak on debate. That will be awesome because we have a very good scene.
Because you have a very good what?
Teachers education.